Have you ever dreamed of having a hanging basket just dripping with sweet, juicy strawberries all summer long? Well, today, we're not just going to dream about it, we are going to build it. We're going to break down the professional's blueprint for turning a simple container into a non-stop strawberry machine. You know the feeling, right? We've all been there. You get this vision in your head of this lush, amazing basket, just overflowing with fruit. But what you actually get is, what, a handful of kind of sad-looking berries? And, a lot of disappointment.
But here's the good news. It's probably not your fault, and I mean that. A hanging basket is actually a pretty extreme place for a plant to live. I mean, think about it. It's getting baked by the sun, it's getting thrown around by the wind, and it has this tiny little bit of soil to survive in. It's basically a constant battle for survival.
So what if you could actually take control of that whole environment? What if you could engineer the perfect setup right from the very beginning? That is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to forget about luck. This is the step-by-step blueprint that can pretty much guarantee you a massive harvest.
All right, let's get right into it. Our journey to this huge harvest starts way before we even get our hands dirty. It really all boils down to two critical choices you have to make right at the start, picking the right kind of plant and giving it the right kind of home.
So first up, let's talk genetics. Now, this might sound a little complicated, but it's really, really simple. Not all strawberries are created equal. We need to pick the right cultivar, which is really just a fancy word for a specific type of plant that's been bred to have certain superpowers, like making tons and tons of fruit. And honestly, this is the most important decision you are going to make.
Okay, so this slide really lays out the two main strategies that strawberries have. On one side, you've got your June-bearing types. They put all their energy into one massive harvest, and then they spend the rest of the season sending out tons of runners. You know, those long stems that try to make new baby plants? Well, in a hanging basket, those runners are just energy vampires. They're sucking the life out of your plant. But then you have the everbearing varieties. These are the smart choice for containers, because they are programmed to focus all their energy on what we want, making fruit all season long.
So which ones should you be looking for? Well, Albion is a total workhorse. It's super tough and it produces a ton of berries. Seascape is another fantastic one that just keeps on giving. And if you want to make your life super easy, look for an alpine variety like Mignonette. This little guy produces 0 runners, which means every ounce of its energy goes into making delicious berries for you.
Now, let's talk about the pot. And this is a big deal, literally. The absolute minimum size for your hanging basket has got to be 12 inches across. Anything smaller than that just doesn't hold enough soil to stay moist on a hot day, and that constant stress is going to seriously limit how many berries you get.
And finally, the soil. Look, we're not just filling a pot here. We're creating the absolute perfect living conditions. The #1 goal is excellent drainage. And why? Because wet, soggy soil has no oxygen in it. And that's the perfect breeding ground for root rot, the #1 killer of strawberries in pots. So by adding stuff like perlite or cocoa coir, you're basically creating these tiny little air pockets in the soil that keep the roots healthy and, well, happy.
Okay, so you've got the right plant, you've got the perfect soil, now it is time to plant. And how you handle these first few weeks is absolutely critical. It really sets the stage for the entire season ahead.
Listen up, because this is the #1 rule of planting strawberries. You have to keep the crown exposed. That's that little central part of the plant, right where the leaves come out. If you bury it, it's going to trap moisture and it's going to rot, and that is game over. It's such a simple mistake, but believe me, it is a fatal one.
Okay, now for a pro tip that's going to feel completely wrong. I mean, it's going to feel like you're doing the exact opposite of what you should. But trust me on this, it is a game changer. For the first few weeks after you plant, you're going to remove every single flower bud that you see.
And here's the absolute genius behind this. By pinching off those first flowers, you're basically sending a crystal clear message to the plant. You're saying, hey, don't worry about making a few berries right now. I want you to focus all your energy on building a massive, healthy root system. I know it feels like a sacrifice, but what you're really doing is setting the stage for a huge explosion of fruit a little later on.
All right, your plan has a super strong foundation. Now it is time to hit the gas. Getting the food and water just right is what's going to keep your strawberry factory pumping out berries all season long.
Now let's talk about a classic puzzle that every single container gardener faces. You see a wilting plant. So is it thirsty or is it actually drowning? The really tricky part is they look almost exactly the same, but giving more water to a drowning plant is basically a death sentence.
So before you even think about grabbing that watering can, do this one simple test. Stick your finger in the soil. If it's bone dry, okay, go ahead and water it. But, and this is important, if the plant is wilting and the soil is already wet, do not water it. That is a massive sign that the roots are suffocating, and more water is only going to make things worse.
You know, to avoid this whole problem, you can use a clever little trick, a self-watering system with capillary wicks. I know, it sounds fancy, but it's really just a piece of absorbent rope that goes from a water reservoir up into the soil. The plant then just drinks exactly what it needs, right when it needs it. It is a total game changer for hanging baskets.
Now, when it comes to feeding your strawberries, this chart here makes it super simple. What you want is a fertilizer that's high in potassium. That's the nutrient that basically tells the plant, hey, make more flowers and fruit. A standard tomato fertilizer is perfect for this. What you absolutely want to avoid is anything with a lot of salt, like fresh chicken manure. In a little pot, that salt can build up and just burn the roots right off.
The main takeaway here is really simple. You want to feed for fruit, not for leaves. If you give it too much nitrogen, you're going to get this gorgeous, lush, leafy green plant with almost no strawberries. Potassium is the secret ingredient for a huge harvest.
And that brings us to the final pro move. You see, most people treat their container strawberries as a one-season wonder, and they just toss them out in the fall. But with just a little bit of care, you can keep them going year after year.
Getting your strawberry plant through the winter is a pretty simple three-step process. First, after your very last harvest, you're going to trim off all the old dead leaves, but be really careful not to damage that central crown. Second, you have to protect the roots from freezing solid. And third, just give it a tiny bit of water, maybe once a month, to keep the roots from completely drying out.
Now, there are a couple of ways you can protect those roots. The easiest, most reliable method is just to move the whole pot into a cold but protected spot, like a shed or maybe an unheated garage. If you don't have a space like that, no worries. You can just group your pots together outside, pile a really thick layer of mulch or leaves on top, and then cover the whole thing with a tarp.
You know, by taking these few simple steps, you're actually doing something pretty cool. You are turning what most people see as a disposable, one-season plant into a high-performing asset that's going to reward you with delicious strawberries for years to come.
So you see, this blueprint isn't really just about strawberries, is it? It's about a whole new way of thinking about container gardening. It's moving from just, hoping for the best to actually engineering for success. So the real question is, now that you know how to create the perfect growing environment inside a pot, what are you going to grow next?